Good afternoon, everyone. We are here at Andreas in Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm Brent. Welcome to this afternoon's live stream. Hope everybody's having a great Sunday. So today I teased that we'd be talking about a few things such as cross-drilled crankshafts and belt tension, since it's been coming up a lot lately. And a lot of people for a long time have been asking me about setting the tension on the auto tensioners, the quote-unquote auto tensioners. And so we'll go over some of that today. Thank you for joining me. Before we get started, again, I want to thank everybody for being here, but I want to let you guys know that we have a women's group here, a women's Porsche driving group here in Charlotte that is kicking off an event. We're a sponsor of that. And that's going to be held September 25th at Hendrick of Porsche in Charlotte. So hopefully you guys can come out and enjoy it. You guys are more than welcome to come, and there'll be a lot of guys with their girls out there. So anyway, yeah, that's going to be September 25th at Hendrick Porsche of Charlotte. So I hope to see you guys there. All right, so give it a few minutes for everybody to come in here, and we'll get started. There's a few things I was setting up before the show. As you know, we do this live, so you know it is what it is. If I don't set up beforehand, then I've got to set up during. And so I was kind of in the middle of it. I try and be on time for these live streams. Sometimes it doesn't happen, but what I'm going to do next is I have the crank set up with the bearings and everything. And I'm gonna look for an auto tensioner, which I have here. Got a bunch of them. I want to make sure I got one. This one doesn't have the spring on it. Of course it wouldn't, but maybe I can use it just for an idea. So everybody, can you hear me? I'm gonna try and find. So I got one here. It's not in bad shape, but it's probably not ideal for the demonstration that I'm going to be going through here in a little bit. So people ask me all the time, is it necessary? Oh, I've got one right here. Here we go. Oh, so they ask me all the time, is it necessary to use the timing belt tensioner tool on a auto tensioner? And I always say yes. And so we're going to dive into this. I've talked about this before in the past, and so I'm going to be sort of going through and showing you guys exactly why you need to be doing that, and then showing you a set tension for the most part on these later cars. So as we do this, if you have any questions, feel free to let me know. Leave a comment below, and I'll try to get to that. But as for now, we're pretty much set up. And as soon as we get a few more people in here, we'll be ready to go. So how is everybody's Sunday? Now that we're all ready to go. Just want to make sure everybody's doing okay and having a lot of fun. This is a place to come hang out, talk about cars and projects you're working on, so feel free to let me know what you're doing. So if you like my old videos and just can't get enough of them, be sure to check out my Patreon. I'm also starting to do a members only here on YouTube, and where we talk a little bit more in depth about everything that we're working on here at the shop and let you guys see it. But it's getting to the point where you can see I've got a bunch of cars outside too, and I'm getting about 10 emails a day for future projects. So looks like we're gonna have to get a bigger shop. So the plan is to one day have enough guys in a bigger shop where we can get all these cars inside, and once everything's inside and I got enough guys, then maybe I can get back to working on my own projects. I've got 3 project cars that I haven't touched in years, and hopefully maybe someday soon I'll get there, but as for right now, it's a long process just trying to keep these things running. Aiden says, howdy Brent. Well, good afternoon, Aiden. Alan says, I'm Al, I'm watching you from the UK. Well, welcome. Thank you for joining in. All right, so anyway, like I mentioned earlier, if you're just now tuning in, we're going to be talking about cross-drilled cranks and belt tension, specifically on the auto tensioners. And so we'll be going through that a little bit here in just a second. We have a beautiful 944S here that we're just setting the timing on. So we've got the cams and everything in time. The belt's already on. I've already tensioned this, but we'll go back through it. A lot of questions come up about the balance shaft belt and everything else, and how loose it should be, where this idler should sit and stuff. So we'll try and get into that. So this one here, this engine didn't get new belts and everything. This is just a retension because we had to take the head off. He'd already had the belts replaced before, so you'll see that the rollers look kind of old, but that's just because it's just getting a retention. But this car sat for a long time, so the rollers seem fine. They're just a little aged, but everything's fine here. But we went in and put new gaskets on everything top end wise. As you may know, we had to pull the head off this thing and get it repaired. So it's all pretty much back together. The belts are tensioned now, but once we go through this demonstration, we'll get the belt covers back on today, and hopefully we can get this car out of here. It's been delayed so much. Been having a lot of problems lately getting parts and getting the wrong parts, and so it's never fun, but yeah, starting to look good. We put some new fuel lines on there for him. And the first thing I thought we'd talk about is crankshafts and cross drilling. So, all right, so I've been in the Porsche community, the 944 specifically, for 20 some odd years now. And every now and then it comes up cross drilling cranks, and there are things that are just blasphemous on to say. So anyway, there's a reason why that the early cars had cross-drilled cranks, and you'll hear often that a lot of people, when they're redoing their later cars, that they'll put cross-drilled cranks in. So today I'm going to be explaining why they think it's good and why Porsche stopped doing it. And we're going to explain how the oil travels through the crankshaft and how the rod bearings are actually lubricated. And we're just going to keep this, you know, fact-based. So anyway, all right. You can see down here I have 2 crankshafts. One is an early. It's cross-drilled because you can see all the way through. That right there, that is the rod bearing. And you can see that this rod journal here, I should say the rod journal, is not cross-drilled. So this is the later crank. Early, now if I flip this over to make them face the same way, it's gonna be all the way through. As you can see all the way through it. So early crankshafts were cross-drilled, and later crankshafts were not. And you've always heard about rod bearing tube failures and stuff. Well, this was more prolific on the earlier cars than the later cars, and that was due to oil aeration. So basically the way the rod bearings get oil is through those holes, but it's actually fed through the main journal here. And these are always cross-drilled. Even on the later ones, they're cross-drilled. And that's because, let me show you the design of the bearing. So this is the upper bearing. So when you're installing an upper bearing, the oil actually comes in here and is able to pass through, and that channel allows the oil to go in here and it goes to the rod bearing. So without this groove, you won't have oil being fed to this. So this is the bottom bearing. Whenever this hole right there is passing over the this section, which is on the bottom, it doesn't get any oil. So only one of these holes are oiling this right here. So the idea is that you'd want the bearing to look like this all the way around, but these types of bearings can't take a lot of load, especially at higher RPMs. So this type of bearing is used, but as you now know, the oil doesn't go to the rod bearings when it's in this section of the bearing. So this is a stronger, better load carrying bearing, but unfortunately it does not pass oil as well to the rod bearings. So when this one is up, for instance, it's now getting oil, but the other one's not. The hole on the bottom is not, just due to the shape of these bearings here. So keep that in mind. You're only getting oil, and like when they're sitting like this and they're getting kind of in this part, you're going to get oil going in the bearing through both holes. But okay, so why is that important? So the reason why it's important is because you have oil at one time or another always going through one of the holes, basically always being pulled in. And if you cross drill here, this was the old way of doing things, not only for Porsche but for a lot of car manufacturers. You cross drilled here because it was thought that even though you're splitting the oil that comes through that single hole 50-50, then you're getting oil 50% here and there on the bearing. But what happens is that when this is up, due to centrifugal force, you're not getting a lot of oil coming out of there, and you're still only getting 50% of the oil out of this hole. So my door is over there creaking in the wind, being annoying. So this was later discovered and done away with, and that's, especially at high RPM, the faster the engine turns, then you're only still getting about 50% of your oil to the rod bearing, and it's aerating, which makes the oil less effective and stuff. So that's why Porsche did away with it. So now we understand that, and we now in today's age have a better understanding of these things. But back then it was very common. But I often hear a lot of people say, well, I'm gonna cross drill my crank and stuff like that. But you got to think that you're now getting only 50% of the oil that you would if you did a what's called a direct cut into it. So anyway, that's a quick look at that, and if you have any questions, just let me know. So anyway, that's the reason why Porsche went from a cross drill crankshaft to a direct oil feed crankshaft, as you might call it. So yeah, pretty fun. If you read a lot of forums and stuff, you will not find much of that information, and in fact a lot of people will tell you to do it. And so there you go. I'm gonna close the door because it's just making a lot of noise. All right, guys, before we get into part 2, hopefully that was fun for you guys. The next part will be on the timing belt and the balance shaft belt tension, specifically later cars, with the auto tensioner. Come over here and grab some tools. So I'm finding more and more people tension their belt by twist methods and stuff. So what we're going to do today is sort of go on that. A lot of people don't want to pay for the tool. I have several tools that I use, and I veered away from, in my balance shaft and timing belt videos, from using those tools because everybody uses their own tools, and a lot of people don't want to buy the $1,000 Porsche tool And so if I showed how to use that, which is pretty straightforward, then it wouldn't really help anyone if they're not going to buy the tool. Second of all, if I use the Ironworks tool, which I had at the time, I don't think I got it anymore, but that one is a little trickier to use because it's basically based on the dial indicator, and it works in reverse of how you would think it'd work. But I also have the Cricut tool, and okay, that one I never really figured out. I have it and I've tried to use it several times, and it doesn't work for me. I don't know if mine just don't work. But anyway, I do find that it works well, so I kind of do know how it works. It works well on the accessory belts, but I never really had any luck with it working on the timing belt and everything. So anyway, I see a lot of people just all the time just doing twist method and stuff. So that's what we're going to kind of base this off of today. We're going to go by doing stuff. And again, this isn't like go out there and do this to your car. This is if you just want some kind of guidelines. Keep in mind that the belt tension is not exact. The problem is that when the belt's too tight, you're going to have problems. If the belt's too loose, it might slap, but you're not going to really have problems beyond that. So it's a variable range, and it's going to depend on the belt. It's going to depend on sometimes even temperature, sometimes even the temperature of the engine. So the belt tension's just a range, and so everything that you do, there's no exact science behind it. You just don't want it so loose that it slaps, but you don't want it so tight it breaks things, type of idea. So this is kind of what we're going to do today. And being as that I've done God knows how many timing belts, I don't use the tools anymore. So I'll go through and I'm going to show you kind of the idea and the guidelines that we use here. And yeah, so again, this is just a guideline. Maybe you won't get it right the first time, but the thing is that it's just an idea. I'm not responsible if you don't do it exactly the way I do it. But all right, so getting into it here, people are probably going to really like this because they don't want to have to use these tensioning tools and stuff. But I really do suggest, and I would advise everybody, if you've never done it before, don't try and do it without the tools. We've been doing this for decades now, and we have a feel for it. We know how the belt should feel. If it's your first time, it's not worth it. Just get the tool or a tool or something, and just, there you go. So anyway, people are going to do it anyway. I know you're going to do it. So we might as well just do it this way. So, all right. So here we have our timing belt and our balance shaft belt. We've already put the distributor on, so I'm going to try and angle it here so you can kind of see. Again, this is just a where we took the head off and we're just retensioning the belts. These belts were changed at some point in the past, and it's not really time for them. But okay, so we've got our balance shaft here, and we have our timing belt up here. So like, as I say, and this is a funny thing though. So I mentioned in my video years ago, it's been about 10 years now, you should be able to turn the water pump, and that's going to tell you whether or not, because if I take an auto tensioner that works perfectly, it's still factory calibrated, and I use my belt tool to double check the tension from that, I can always turn the water pump. At 944 Fest one year, we had to do an emergency belt on somebody's car. I think one of the idlers came out, and we put a belt on there, and I went over and I turned the water pump, and I was like, this is perfect. Now keep in mind, it takes a lot of pressure to grab on and turn that water pump. You're not just gonna just spin it easily if it's done right. And I think out of like 4 of the 5 people that were around could not turn the water pump where I could. So you got to keep that in mind. So like, I'm not saying I got like super grip strength or anything. I've got pretty big hands though. I'm not a super huge guy, but I'm like, I got big hands. And when I come over to the water pump and I can spin it, what is still pretty difficult for me, but I can turn it. Maybe I can put a mark on that. If you'll notice that chip right there, I gotta get a whole hand on it though. See how it still turns? But it took several guys and they couldn't do it. So that's not probably, you know, the best thing, because some guys might still get it too loose and then they come back. And keep in mind, it's going to take a lot of strength and not everybody's going to be able to do that. But it's a good rule of thumb, because if your belt's too loose, your water pump's still going to turn. It's not like you're going to have the belt so loose that the water pump just doesn't turn. It's going to be fine. The thing is that you just don't want it so loose that the belt slaps and it annoys you. Over time, that can probably, but that would take much, much longer. I have seen people come in many times. They just put their auto tensioner on and let it go, and the water pump fails within 20 miles. And this is exactly why this happens, and then we'll go in and we'll talk about the setting the tension with these things. So anyway, I have a auto tensioner down here. Going down here now. So this is basically the layout of the spring tensioner. Basically, you loosen these two bolts here and you're able to compress this. It's going to be pretty hard not being in the car, and I don't even know if these bolts are loose. I just found it. So anyway, this arm swings down like this and it compresses the spring. So by the factory, what they did was they set it using a nut that goes into a little stud here. And as a matter of fact, I picked one of these up and I didn't think I was going to need it, but actually it's going to help a little bit here. So come over here. Okay, anyway, I was going to see if I also have the spring for this. I need to assemble this one. So this is a partially disassembled one. And what it's going to allow us to do here is take a look at the calibration method. So basically, as this arm swings down and the spring compresses, there was a little nut on there. And what they would do at the factory is that they would set this nut at a certain spot, so that way when you release these two bolts here and it swung out, it was stopped. So that way it wouldn't over tension the belt. What happens is this nut goes missing. And you can see here, well, maybe you can't see, but if you look down in there, there's no nut. And when that happens, the spring is free to just go and do whatever it wants. It just expands all the way out. It over tensions the belt, and now you're going to have failure because it's going to tighten the belt too much. So I think a lot of people think that if this fails in some way, then it won't tension the belt enough, and that is incorrect. What's going to happen is now this thing is free to just do whatever, because there's nothing holding it here. You can see that there should be something holding that, and it's not there. So that spring is just able to swing all the way out and over tension the belt. So that is why you always want to use a tensioning tool when you're even setting these later ones. So I would say probably 1 out of 50 that I've seen actually work properly. And hold on, let me go back to this for a second. This is on wrong, I think. So I think this, so if you're watching this pulley's on backwards, so don't pay that any attention. Sometimes that happens, but don't make that mistake. So the flange needs to go on the back side, but I just happened to notice that and thought I'd share that with you before you try and install one that way. Sometimes we're just throwing these things back together just to have them together. But anyway, let me turn you back around this way so you're not looking at me. Okay. So now that we understand the tensioner here, and we do know that this one is also not calibrated correctly. And if you look at the spring that I had in the floor, you can see that it was pretty much maxed out, where this one's kind of squished in. So we have the tension set about the way it should be from the factory. So again, it's a range, it's not an exact thing. And we're not gonna end up with any belt slap here because it's nice and tight and it's very hard to spin the water pump, but it is there. It's not gonna break the bearing, as you can see. There's pretty much a direct line from the backside of the camshaft here to the tensioner, and as you over tension it, it just puts a lot of stress on this right here and it will break it. And the auto tensioners are the worst for that. I've now seen one time where the early belt tensioner, the eccentric idler, has broken the shaft off, and I'm not happy about that, but it sure beats the auto tensioner. Every time you have to do anything, you've got to still do it the same way that you do the old ones at this point in time, because that little nut just gets lost due to age. And then not only that, you have to remove them completely to just get the belt on. So I'll break for a second here and I'll take one of your comments. Al says hi. Oh, hi Al, hope you're having a great Sunday. Happy Fox says hi B. Well, happy Sunday to you. And let's see. Top Trash Man says, do you have any tips on installing the window scrapers for 944? I do. I do. So you have to get the Porsche ones. You can't get the Euro ones. They just don't make them long enough to go down into little clips. So you look at this car here, you can see that it looks like it has it's actually, I think, original on this car, but there are clips that just sort of, I don't even know if you'd want to call them clips. They're just these metal little tabs sort of that go all down the door here, and that's what this slides into. And the Euro ones are just short of locking in. They're also a little fatter. They don't fit in properly, and from the factory they were cut a little bit right there. So unfortunately, the only ones that even work are the original OEM ones. And if you can find those, I think if they are available, they're pretty pricey, but yeah, just stay away from the Euro ones. I think that that's the only other company that I know that makes them, but there you go. That is the only option that we have, unfortunately. And sometimes when we repaint these, we have to take them off and save them, because we can buy new ones. They don't fit. As soon as you roll up the window, they pop out. So we have to put the ones that are back in there. So it's very unfortunate. Hopefully someone out there will eventually start making some. Happy Fox says, can you name a few things that can mess up the mix and make the MOT say your emissions look like the Lamada is gone? Causes other than the sensor. Yeah, probably someone's been in there messing with the AFM mixture. So I got an AFM around here. Anyway, there's a little cap on the airflow meter. Let's see if I can find one. Everything I got in here right now is a turbo, and you can't really see them. You can kind of see this one. So there should be a cap on this. Usually if the cap's missing, someone's pried that out, and there's like a M5 hex head down in there. I don't call it Allen because Allen's a name brand, but hex head that goes down in there, and if you start messing with that, it can really mess up the fuel mixture. It's mainly for idle, but it can also affect it in other ranges, because it works like as you unscrew it, it works as a bypass. So if you go down, it's going to add fuel, because it's going to move the wiper and the airflow meter further up and add fuel. And as you unscrew it, it's going to let more air by and it's going to drop the wiper a little bit. So technically it's for idle, but it will mess with things in other parts of the range. Maybe not at high RPM, but typically if it's a vacuum line, I mean, well, you just never know what other people have done. There are a lot of videos out there. I've seen them all over YouTube of like, hey, mess with this because, oh, what was one video that I saw? I'm sure you've seen it, Max. What was the video we saw about the wiper? Oh, take the wiper on. The guy removes the cover on the airflow meter and then he goes in and adjusts the screw on it and then like moves it like that. But have you not seen that one? The guy was like, he's like gain more horsepower by like taking your airflow meter apart and then doing this is like, that is never do that. Never do that. And so it's like, if they come in and they're taken apart and we see the glue around the edge, we throw them away because somebody's messed with it and you're never going to get it right again, because if they uncalibrate that, it's gone forever because we don't have any idea where it would have been set as far as the number dial gauge goes. Now, it's very possible that if they've just touched that screw with the wiper arm, we can get it back. But you're talking about like, we have to go in and set up all sorts of emission stuff to try and get this thing back running right. And some cars don't like to play well with this, especially the earlier cars with the sniffers. So they're just junk at that point. So anyway, getting into like, maybe it could be a vacuum leak. But anyway, my point is the airflow meter's questionable. Yeah, don't mess with that. But he's thinking that it's something electrical, like a vacuum line or something. If it was running fine, then it's very possible it could be. My understanding of what you were saying was that it runs fine, but something's wrong. I wouldn't think this is necessarily a vacuum leak. If it's that bad, you're gonna have something bigger than a small leak, of course, and typically the cars don't want to run well. So I have seen it where some vacuum leaks, the cars will start up and die. Sometimes they don't start up at all. Sometimes they run perfectly fine, and they have a mind of their own sometimes. So if you're saying nobody's touched it, then that's a pretty odd one. I would just go through in that case and check vacuum lines. If it's something sudden, so for instance, like you're saying it was running fine, but now it's not, then that's more than likely a vacuum line then. But from just your initial question at first, I would just think that like somebody's been in there playing with your airflow meter. But if that isn't the case, then yeah, just check for vacuum leaks. Go back up a little bit. Thought I saw something. Top Trash Man says, I got the scrapers from 944 online, but it seems like it's going to be a fun job. It's not terrible if they sent you a good brand. Honestly, I'd have to look and see which ones they're selling. But if it has Euro on it, you're gonna have a very difficult time. But yeah, they just pull right out. So put your window down, pull it out. It pulls out pretty easy. You're gonna notice that it's got quite the grip on there, but the Euro ones are just a little thicker and a little shorter, and they just don't go down in there correctly. But I hope you have good luck with it. If you get them to work, let me know. So Happy Fox says it was just running a little rough. It was more smooth when part. Yeah, it sounds like maybe a vacuum line or something come off. Yeah, if you're getting something like that from the MOT guys, then yeah, motor mounts probably isn't the problem. Jeffrey says hello to Brent and all his followers. Well, thank you very much. Hope you're having a great Sunday, Jeff. And then he goes on to say, how difficult is it to add cruise control to an NA car? My wife was inquiring. So there's good news, bad news. Um, honestly, I think like most of the cars are wired for cruise control. There might be some very early cars that didn't have even the plugs for cruise control. So you should be able to buy, I think you said you had 84. So to add it, you just need the computer. I think you should be wired for the computer. The fuses are already there because it's a fuse for something else. And then you would just need the actuator or the servo and plug it in. Well, you need a stalk and you have to plug that in. So I think all the wiring is there. You just need the computer, the stalk, and the servo, and that's how you could get it with your early car, because even if you didn't have cruise control, you still have the hall sender on the back of your speedometer plugged into the tachometer, and so that's already hooked up. All you got to do is just put those 3 items in there and you should be good to go. But aftermarket cruise control is pretty cheap, comes with all that stuff. Actually, like a lot of the computers for that are built into it. All you do is you add, you don't need to add vacuum, it'll do it. It might do a servo as well, and you just hook it up. But it can look kind of, I know I had to do it on one of my cars. I had actually gotten a aftermarket cruise control from the 80s, and I thought that this would be perfect because 924Ss typically didn't come with it. My 88 did, but not 87s. I don't think I'd ever seen an 87 with cruise control. So I'd got this period correct piece and put it in there, and it was 3 wires to hook up. It was pretty easy, but mounting the little control panel was kind of terrible because I didn't want it to be seen, like obviously on the dash, so I had to put it up underneath there, and I had to reach up underneath the dash to set it and stuff. But it worked great, and it actually used the coil signal to keep RPM. But with the factory cruise control, you have a little bit more options. So you could add the clutch switch. You'll have to add the clutch switch. That's another thing I forgot. So you should have the wiring for the clutch switch. You add that, and that allows you to, even if you set the cruise control in 4th gear, you can press the clutch, change in the 5th, and let it out again, and it'll go right back into holding the speed. So you don't get that with aftermarket ones, but they are to some degree a little bit easier to install, and they work fantastic. But yeah, you just, that little thing where you can change gears makes the stock one just a little bit cooler in my opinion. John says, hello, I sent you a video about a strange metallic noise coming around the intake manifold. Well, after a couple of mechanics, turns out to be the alternator bearing. Oh, got you. I'm sorry, I think maybe that's in the video, but very common issue. So before we get back to belts, I'm gonna try and get back to that here in a second. I've heard that alternator thing many times. So the few times I have seen the alternator bearings go out, it makes a sound. It really sounds like it's coming from over here somewhere. My 84, when it failed, it made a noise, like a tapping noise, really loud. And instead of coming from the alternator, which was where it was coming from, it sounded like it was over here. It only took me to use like a stethoscope to like locate it. So if you're ever hearing something like that, sometimes it's the alternator. I've seen that a few times, and it's the weirdest thing. It kind of just throws the sound. But I'm glad you were able to find it, and I'm glad it was something easy. But yeah, guys, just keep that in mind. Here in just a second, we're gonna get back to belts. So, where were we at? All right. So, like I mentioned, people are not gonna do it with the, I might need to get, let me grab a socket. Let me grab a socket instead. I thought I could do it with that wrench. The lower one can be done with the wrench, but I don't want to risk doing that. But a lot of people are just gonna, they're never gonna try and change these belts with the tensioning tool. They won't buy it. They won't, one way or another, they're gonna try and avoid it. They're gonna do the twist method. So today I'm gonna show you pretty much how we do it here. I don't need one of these, but I want a small one. Okay. I'll grab a 13 over here. It never hurts. If you have an original alternator, it's probably a good idea to have it serviced. 13, that's 11. There we go. Yeah. John says, funny enough, it just started after I changed the belts and rollers. Yeah, when they sit a while, they like to do that. So it's probably dry. You're probably driving it a little bit, and then you let it sit, and just gave it the opportunity it needed to make you upset you, like or freak you out. I'm sure. All right, so what I'm going to do with this auto tensioner here is we're going to loosen these two. One's a nut, one's a bolt. We're going to loosen these right here. Don't have to do it too much, but you can see all I did was loosen those. And I'm going to go back up here to my water pump, and I can't spin it for anything now. And remember that with one that is set properly from the factory, so if I find one that still has a nut in it and I use my tensioning tool on this, I should be able to spin this water pump, but right now I cannot. So that tells me that this spring tensioner has completely failed. So in the factory workshop manual, what it says to do is to take the belt, put your thumb about right there with these spring tensioners, and you should see it moving back and forth a little bit. Now, the only thing that that's going to really do is tell you that the spring is still working. Beyond that, it doesn't tell you anything else. But that's what the factory workshop manual says to do. And when Porsche designed these, I don't think they had any idea that one day that little nut was going to fall out and over-tension your belt, causing failure. So if it was original, back in the day, you used to be able to just release these and go on about your way, but here we are 40 years on with these things badly misbehaving. So yeah, let me see if I can get a little bit more light down in here for you guys. I got my light right here, just need to find the plug for it. Says, would a bad alternator cause the battery warning light not to come on when the circuit is on, engine off? On a late car, the charging circuit is dead, 12 volts. Yes, absolutely yes. I have seen this many times firsthand. So I went through one time with a car trying to find everything, because you'd think when the alternator, I mean, this is the way you're trained, right? You think that when the alternator is bad, then the battery light should come on. But if you're just turning the switch on and the battery light isn't coming on, that means the diodes in the alternator are more than likely fried. Now keep in mind that, so you're probably driving your car and the alternator light is probably not coming on at all, but you are getting battery voltage from the battery voltage, but the battery light doesn't come on, and that is a bad alternator causing that. So I've seen that firsthand, went through all the circuit. Now keep in mind, what I was going to say is that the alarm circuit also has the alternator charging through it too. So if someone happened to steal your car in some way or another because they hot wired it, the battery won't charge and it'll drive until the battery dies. So check that circuit as well. So when you jump the alarm module, if it's been jumped or if the alarm module is bad, keep in mind that you have to jump the 2 wires for the alternator, and that could cause it, but I have seen where just the alternator diodes go bad and you just don't get any light when you turn on. So the light should come on every time you turn that switch on. And if it did before and you hadn't touched anything and you still have the original alarm, it's either going to be that or the alternator, but more than likely it's probably the alternator. And if your car doesn't have an alarm, it's definitely the alternator. So, but there's always like little things where this wire got chewed up and stuff. So you never know, but I have actually been down many rabbit holes with a car, no battery light, and it just turns out to be the alternator. So I hope that helps. All right. Now we have some light. Let's shed some light on the subject. All right, so this is our auto tensioner. And Happy Fox says it was lit all the time when my diodes are bad. Yes, so that's the flip side of it. It can happen 2 ways. So if you have usually the voltage regulator goes bad. It's not necessarily the diodes, but the voltage regulator goes bad. You'll have the light on all the time. But well, sometimes the voltage regulator fails and you get too much power going through the thing and the battery light doesn't come on. So there's the other flip side of that. But sometimes it dies, like in this case, like it was just completely shot. We just had to throw the whole alternator away because it wasn't the voltage regulator itself. It was pretty much the whole alternator had gone bad and turning the key on and we had nothing. So yeah, they'll fail in all sorts of different ways, but that is another way that it can fail. It'll fail where your light comes on all the time, but in certain cases it will fail where your light doesn't come on at all because it's not completing the circuit. So, all right, getting back to this. Okay, so he said that he'd swap the regulator 3 times in diode. Yeah, so that's just different ways they'll fail, but you can have it fail where the light stays on all the time or it will not come on at all. So that was part of my initial thought, was that even if the diodes failed, because that's where I'd been before, even if they failed, the light should be on all the time. So I had went through down this rabbit hole trying to check the circuitry, but replacing the alternator actually fixed it, and we actually have that car out here again for different work this time, and it's still working perfectly. But anyway, there is our auto tensioner, and these bolts and nuts are loose here, so all I did was loosen these up, and that tightened it up. Now in no way can I spin this water pump. And going back to what I said before, if I have a auto tensioner that is still pristine from the factory, and I put it on here, and I put my factory tensioner tool on here, I should be able to grab that water pump and still turn it. But in this case, I can't turn it with all my strength, and like I said, it might be turning it a little bit. I doubt it though. Anyway, it's still too tight. That's tighter than I like. And like I said, at 944 Fest that year, I could turn it, but 4 out of the 5 guys couldn't. So, you know, this is more of a test of strength than not necessarily a test of like how tight your belt is. So this is probably not going to work for a lot of guys. But going back to what the factory manual says, take your thumb, put it here, watch the spring tensioner. You can probably just see it barely wiggle there. Let me get a little bit closer. See how that wiggles? So every time it goes down a little bit, it's getting a little bit looser. So you can use that to your advantage there. That is how you can easily set your tension, because you guys aren't going to do this with the tools. So we don't want to make it go down. I can already like really try and turn it, and I can turn that, but it's tighter than it needs to be. So again, loose is fine, tight's wrong. You just don't want it too loose or it's slapping things. So I'm going to bring that down. Watch that arm move down just a little bit by me doing that. Let's see, if I move it as far where you guys notice it on camera, it's too loose. So I'm just barely gonna just put a little tension on that, and then I'm gonna tighten this up, and then we're gonna check it. So yeah, it just barely moves, but if I'm moving enough for you guys to notice on camera, then it's way, way, way too loose. And so like, here we go. Right here. Yeah, I still have to turn it really, really hard, but there it is. Water pump's gonna turn fine, and that's how you do it. You just lock your nut and bolt down now, and that's how you can easily set it with the auto tensioner. But again, if this is your first time ever doing that, use the tool. That ain't on me. We've been doing this for a long time now, but there you go. Next, we're going to talk about the balance shaft belt. But before that, I'll take a few more questions. Okay, it says I had mine fixed 15 minutes. Once I had the new diode wall installed, push plus industrial bearing lasted a little bit longer. Well, awesome. Yeah. I would advise everybody to just probably buy a new alternator at this point. It's 40 years old. So even if you replace the voltage regulator and stuff, there's other things that can go bad, such as the bearings and stuff. It's like, it's a good measure. They're not terribly expensive. I mean, they cost about as much as a battery. I don't hear anybody complain about the battery cost. And an alternator's a little, it's actual part of machinery, you know. It's it's a wear item too. So yeah, get you a new alternator at this point. It's just one of those things. It's 40 years old. Yeah, it never hurts. I don't. Sometimes I don't recommend people doing things just to do things, but an alternator just never hurts. You don't want to be on the side of the road because you should change the 40-year-old alternator. You know, it's old man by now. That's a long time, you know. That was a well-built alternator, but let's it's like the seals. It's like the seals are great. They lasted 40 years, but let's change them, you know. All right, so next we'll get into the balance shaft tension here. And this one's actually come up a lot. I've had a lot of people ask me about the setting the tension with the auto tensioner. Well, it's pretty much that simple. Getting the belt on is not, but setting the tension is not terrible on these things. And the balance shaft belt still really gets a lot of people. I think I was reading on another it was on Facebook or something. I'm in a bunch of different groups, but I don't ever comment. I don't really ever leave my thing. But I read them, I enjoy them. I don't really have time to respond to anything, but yeah, unfortunately I don't have time to just sit around and respond to everything, but I thought I would here on the live stream. What the heck, right? So this is the balance shaft belt, and this is about how loose it should be. I've already gone over this. There's nothing different. The reason why I went ahead and reset the tension on this timing belt is that no one had ever actually seen me do one with the automatic or the auto tensioner arm. So balance shafts, you know the drill. You know, it's pretty easy to set up, get everything in line. And that last balance shaft on the bottom is going to be just the tooth ahead, and then when you rotate it in the clockwise position, then it's going to all fall into place. Everything's going to line up and you're going to lock it down. Now, a lot of problems people are having is with the tension. So today I'm going to try and show you a little bit about tension. So I'm going to break some people's hearts here, but again, don't ever twist the belt. It says on the box, don't twist or bend the belt. And so again, we don't use the tools here. I've been doing them for like 20 years. But again, if it's your first time, please get the tool. But I see people all the time coming on forums saying, I need to know, is this too tight? Is this too loose? Too tight is terrible. Too tight's terrible. I know the timing belt's a little snug, but the balance shaft belt should be uncomfortably loose, as some people say. So but I was reading a comment. But anyway, don't ever want to go too tight. Your balance shaft belt's going to be way looser than the timing belt. And the reason why I'm always saying, like, please use the tool if it's your first time is because even after the advice of other people, they still come back and the belt's too tight, and you don't want too tight. So that breaks things with anything, whether it's your alternator pulley, your water pump pulley, your balance shafts breaking out of their housings because you put the belt on too tight. They have to have a lot of give. So today I'm going to show you how we do this without any tools. So, all right, you look down in there and you'll see the tensioner way down there at the bottom. I'm going to try and point to it if I can get the light to stay on it. So this is our tensioner. Now we've already got this set to where I like it, but this should be turned clockwise, because if you turn it counterclockwise, the belt's going to sit way too high. As a matter of fact, I'm double check that, but yeah, so, okay. So once we have it set the way we like, the belt's going to kind of do this right here. So you should be able to pull that belt up. Do you see this outer ring on the water pump? You should be able to pull it up to that right there. Should be about that loose right there. Now that we covered that, you'll see that there's no twisting involved. You're just going to take the belt and just do that, and it should just touch that outer edge right there. That's it. There you go. Belt tension set. Of course, you got to make sure that all the slack is out of the belts before you can do this adjustment. If you have something over here that's still loose, then this isn't going to work. But this is why I always say use your tensioner. Use the pro tool. It's your first time. Borrow one. Get something, because you're not going to have a feel for it. But there you go. So setting the idler pulley. So I went over this in the video. The idler pulley needs to be 0.5 millimeters or half a millimeter off the lower belt down here, and you can use a credit card, a piece of cardboard, whatever you want to use to adjust that. But it should just barely graze this belt. And if you look right there, it's not grazing the belt. That's because I haven't added preload yet. As soon as you add the preload, like the engine's turning and this preload started, it's going to come down and touch that roller, just barely. It's not going to interfere with that roller otherwise. As soon as I let go of the belt, look what happens. I pull on it and I let go of it. It comes off. That's how that should be set. All right, so hopefully that gives you some ideas of how to do that here. And I'll go back up and read some comments. Happy Fox says, I think it's cool that they make things to be serviced. Also, every 40-year-old part goes away out better than anything that you get now. No, that's absolutely right. I've gotten brand new alternators that I had a year warranty on them, and the next day after that warranty went out, that alternator went out. So if you can rebuild them, that's great. I'd agree with rebuilding them. There's nothing wrong with them. But getting one that's already rebuilt, I mean, it's going to be the same thing if you buy one. So you're not going to get a new one. You're going to get a rebuilt one. But yeah, you get my point. It's better to have it serviced now than than when it's too late. Aiden says the only thing that gave me pause was that the alternator is relatively new according to previous owner. Well, if that's true, then I wouldn't really worry about it then. But a lot of these guys are definitely rolling around with some ancient equipment. Happy Fox says they're awfully good at calculating. A little too good. Because here's what happened with that alternator. I bought one for my Mazda that I had. The alternator goes out. I bought it. the alternator actually went out the day the warranty expired, but I did not have time to get it out. I was too busy doing other stuff, so I pulled it out the next day and took it up there, and they were like, yeah, your warranty actually expired yesterday. So had I made time for it, I would have got a replacement alternator, but I ended up going with a different brand and stayed away from doing that, because what am I going to do, put another one in there every year? Like, so anyway. Anyway, guys, hope you enjoyed the live stream. I'm going to get off here, and you guys get out there and start driving these cars again. Have a good one. We'll see you next Sunday. See you then.